If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to be notified of future videos. Thank you.
Hello Internet, I'm glad to be back and I'm glad to tell you we've got Major Buttons Heyns here with us. He's by now a good friend and he's going to talk to us today about his time with Magnus Malan. Now that would have been very interesting because times were changing in South Africa and he had like a bird's eye view on what was happening. So Buttons, you're most welcome. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. But it's over to you. Last time we were speaking, you got shanghaied out of a school of infantry, much against your will. The general said to you, you're going to work there. And I suppose then you arrived.
Of course, yes. Good afternoon. Yes, indeed, I did arrive with a bang. And I started there June 1987. Now that was also the month that I've already planned my wedding. So when I got there, I was instructed to go and do some shopping. Obviously, I didn't have the clothing that was appropriate for this type of work. And I was kitted out from top to bottom with suits and attire. Also suitcases, because we're going to travel a lot, I said. Yes, and so I'm there now, by hook or by crook, but I'm starting to work there. And I think it was about in late June, I got married, so I flew up to Joburg to get married. Got married, and I was, I think, there for one day after my marriage. On the Sunday, I got a call from General Opperman to say that I must get back to Cape Town as soon as possible because we are going somewhere. So my honeymoon was cut short. I had a one-day honeymoon. So we got to Cape Town, and the plan was that we're going to go to Paraguay to go and meet up there with the president, and also previously the military had given Paraguay some old cannons, and so we were just going to finalize this sort of handing and taking over. Now the plan was to, how do we get there? And previously the minister had spoken to the Air Force and told them that they must have a look at aeroplanes for the president and the ministry. Now at that stage, I think we had a 707, Boeing 707, but it can only land at 1 or 2 or 3 airports, and it was also outdated already. And I think the instructions were quite clear in the sense that this aeroplane that they're going to source now must be able to obviously fly a long distance. And they decided on a Falcon 90. So they bought 2 Falcon 90s. And the general decided, okay, we're going to take one of the Falcon 19s and we're going to fly now to Paraguay with that one. It's not a very big airplane. And we were 4 packs on the airplane, and also the air hostess, because we have to eat. But unbeknown to us, it was a logistical nightmare for the Air Force, because they had to now also place crew on different places because the pilots can only fly X amount of time. But yeah, eventually we got away there, and we first flew to Abidjan in Ivory Coast, where we had a meeting with President Fit Pinheiro. Slept over there that night. And obviously the pilots handed in the flight plan because the next stop was going to be Recife in Brazil. Next morning we took off and flew out, and I don't know how far out from Recife we got escorted by two, let's say, Mirages, and they was talking to the pilots and asking them, now what are we doing in their airspace? So when we landed in Recife, it was just military all around us, surrounding the aeroplane, and we were taken out of the aeroplane into the airport and locked up in a room there. So it was myself, the general, the doctor, and Brigadier Opperman at that stage. So he could speak Spanish. I could luckily speak a little bit of Portuguese. And we explained to them that, well, this is very unfortunate, but we're on our way to Paraguay. And we have to just refuel here. And they asked us questions, and we explained to them who we are. And it took a long time for them to now fathom that we are not here unannounced. But actually what happened is the flight tower in Abidjan forgot to submit the flight plan. So that was now the big holdup, and why we why we weren't arriving there with welcome arms. So eventually it got sorted out, and we explained to them who the minister is and who we are and where we're going. But it took a long time for us to get out of there. And obviously by then, our flight has been delayed now. On the other side, in Paraguay, there was a big parade because we were going to fly in there, and on arrival, we'll have a big parade. Obviously, the president of Paraguay was not happy. I could assume that. And when we arrived late, we were taken to the formal dinner that we had with the president and his ministry. So that was quite a culture shock for me to arrive there unannounced. But that's the way that my introduction to my time at the Ministry of Defense. Eventually we got back. So at my job description at the ministry was that I have to now look at intelligence, look at newspapers every day, advise the minister of, obviously there's other people as well that look at it. I have to now answer letters from parliamentarians or other people out there that wants to know something about the military or wants to get their children out of the defense force or out of national service, which actually hasn't got anything to do with the Ministry of Defense. It's actually another department, but everybody thought it was our job. So we just referred it all the time. And then also parades. I had to attend all the parades with the minister. And so I was slowly but surely getting into this job. Still not able to type, but luckily we could dictate the letters to the typing pool. And I remember my first, my first call I got from that I had to unfortunately answer the telephone was when General Jannie Geldnys phoned to speak to the general. So there's a certain protocol that you have to adhere to. First of all, you put him on hold, and then you ask the minister if he wants to talk to him. And then you get back and say he's not available, or yes, I'm going to put you through. But normally that wasn't my work because Cecile, my colleague, Cecile Burger, she used to do that, but at that moment she wasn't there. So I had no choice but to answer the phone. And the setup of the ministry's office space was like, the one corner was the ministry, and then in the other corner was the Director General, which is the army now, Jannie Heyns. So that was in a specific building in Cape Town. So all the departments or government departments had the same setup. So each level of floor, you had the ministry and the Director General on the same floor. So it was walking distance for him, if need be. So I answered the telephone. Now for me, it was quite a machine in front of me. I think 14 or 15 knobs there. So I had to now put him through, or actually first call the general in his office, and then when I did the wrong knob, I cut him off. I cut the General Heyns off. So he phoned again. So I said, well, there's a little bit of a problem with our telephones here. I've already informed Telkom about it. And I cut him off again because I'm using the wrong extension. Now, so I ran into the corridor and shouted for Cecile to come and help, or anybody that knows how to do this to come and help me. By then I'd already entered the minister's office and told him that there's a little bit of a hold up here, but I'm going to put the general through now. So the third time that he phoned, Jannie Heyns phoned, he said to me, do you think I need to walk over and maybe we can leave this telephone situation? I can just walk over there, which I said, no, it's fine. We've sorted the problem out. By then, Cecile had already arrived and she obviously helped me out of my conundrum. So that was my first telephone situation. And I explained to them previously that I'm not good at this situation. But later it obviously became much better and easier. I can also remember the first time that President Botha phoned. And when I answered the phone, it was one of those days again where Cecile was not in the office. I immediately jumped to attention behind the desk. And because there's a normal telephone line and there's a red line. Now, if that red line or red telephone, if that one rings, it's a situation of you just put the person through because it can only be the president. So yeah, I was standing at attention, and obviously by then I already knew the right knob to push, and luckily that went on and through without any hiccups. Otherwise, I wouldn't have survived that one. Yeah, so it was funny in one sense, but also serious. For instance, one of my job descriptions was that I have to book all the aeroplanes for all the ministers if they need a military transport. Now, there's obviously rules and regulations that you have to adhere to. So first of all, they have to drive. And if they can't drive there because it's too far, or maybe they have other meetings that they can't attend or can't get back to, then they have to fly by SAA. And if that's not possible, then they can apply for a military airplane or chopper or whatever. And then you would coordinate that with Air Force HQ and set up the flight. Excuse me. So one of the other situations was that this specific day, Mr. Botha phoned, or actually his secretary phoned and said, but he needs a flight to Beaufort West. So obviously we went through the drills and I said, no, why can't he drive to Beaufort West, etc., etc. There's no airport or big airport at Beaufort West, and they had other meetings that he had to attend to. And he would like to have a Puma helicopter to take him there. Now, there weren't any Puma helicopters available, so the best alternative that we could give him was a Dakota. And the secretary said to me that he will not go in a Dakota. So I said, it's not just a Dakota. It is a VIP Dakota with the proper seats. And we'll even put a air hostess there with food and drinks so that it's not too a disastrous flight. And he said, no, he will convey the message to Botha, but I can be assured that he will phone shortly. So I had to now make a plan. So I went to General Malan and I said to him, listen, you're going to get a call just now from Botha because he doesn't want to fly with a Dakota. And tell him that there's no other airplanes available, so you will just have to fly with a Dakota. And it wasn't a few minutes later, and Botha phoned and he wants to speak to the general, but I've already briefed him. And the general said to me, okay, but I think that's a good idea. Let's give him the Dakota, because let's keep that story and say that there's no other airplanes available. Let him make use of the Dakota. So after a few minutes, he came out of the office and he said, yes, you can put the Dakota on standby and they're going to use the Dakota. So he had to then fly with the Dakota, but I knew that this is going to be backfiring on me soon. So it did eventually. When I bumped into Mr. Botha, he did give me a little bit of a scrubbing because he said he knew that it wasn't the truth. But actually it was General Malan. He likes to how do you call it in English? Poetsbak. He likes to play
tricks.
Play tricks on people. He loves that. Yeah, so that was also a funny situation. My first parade with the minister was actually very special for me because a few years back with operations in Angola, there were some of my previous battalion, 3-2 battalion, some of the members there that were nominated for the Honoris Crux medals. And it came back from the board a few times, once or twice, I think. And I was then still at the HQ at 3-2, and we had a visit from the General Malan and some of the generals and army generals one day. And when they flew back, my previous commander, Eddie Viljoen, gave me an envelope. And he said, just hand this envelope to General Malan and ask him to have a look at this, please. Which I then did. And when I did my first big parade in Cape Town, these 4 people that were nominated for Honoris Cruxes were then on the parade, and I was part of that parade, which was very special for me up to today. Yeah, so obviously in the Ministry of Defense at that time, it was also the era where the war in Angola was quite serious, but it was also the time when negotiations had started with the Angolans, the Cubans, the Russians to withdraw from Angola. And I was privileged to be part of some of these discussions, in a sense. So the first one we had was, obviously there were many of these negotiations over a few years, but the first one that we went to was in Cairo in 1998 or 1988 in June. And there we had separate discussions with the Cubans, with the Angolans, and Chester Crocker was also the Undersecretary of Foreign Affairs noted specifically for Africa. And then after that, it was Brazzaville, also in 88. After that, it was when we went to New York for the signage of the trilateral agreement, and which was very, very significant because this has been going on for now 5, 6, 7 years to get this trilateral agreement to be signed. Now, it was also true that for Mr. P.W. Botha, when he was president, he always had one of the preconditions was that we can't just withdraw from Namibia, we also have to have the Cubans withdraw and the Russians withdraw, so that there's obviously a situation where we will not be out of Namibia and they will have first rate and handout and do what they want to do. So that was initially also his prerequisite, and but I think the Americans stalled a lot with this. That's why it took so long. I can remember when we were in New York, we stayed there in the UN Plaza Hotel, which is a few blocks from the United Nations headquarters. And yeah, obviously you must know that in those days we weren't the flavor of the month for the rest of the world. So we went, when we landed at JF Kennedy Airport, and we were escorted with a cavalcade of police and CIA and Speed Corps, and it's a few kilometers, I think about 50 kilometers out of New York City. So it was quite a fun ride to get there. And we booked in there, and on that floor was also CIA and other security of the American security. And there was a guard outside of our room. So every time that, and obviously we had meetings in the room, and then at one stage, I think it was in the afternoon, General Malan said, but he's hungry now, can't we order, in the room order a few hamburgers or so and some coffee? Which I did then, and now this order arrives at the door where there's a security man standing there. And they have to now inspect the hamburgers first and check the coffee flask if there's not anything inside there, unforeseen. Eventually the hamburgers and the coffee got inside. And so that was very funny for me, because it was serious security around us. And whenever we traveled, we used a lift down to the basement. The cars were then parked with the door right in front of the opening of the lift, and we got in, and then we had the cavalcade of people escorting us again. But so one day, the day that we actually had to go to the announcement, the general decided he'll walk there. So I had to now inform the CIA that we're going to walk there. We don't want to drive there. It's about 4 blocks and we're going to walk there. So they said, but hold on, must give us a few minutes, like 10 or 15 minutes before you can start walking, because they have to now close down the roads for us to walk. And we had about 15 to 20 security escorts now walking towards the UN building. Yeah, so we sat down there. I can remember on the main platform was Boutros Ghali. He was the chief of the UN. General Mr. George Shultz, I think he was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, America. There was Fidel Castro, it was General Malan, it was Pik Botha, and also Foreign Minister of Angola. And everybody had a small window of opportunity to say something and inform the Security Council this is now what's going to happen. And then after that, the signature will take place. So the second last speech was Mr. Fidel Castro, where he now used the same rhetoric and actually wasn't a conciliatory speech that he gave there. It was more like a fierce, fiery speech. And unfortunately for him, Mr. Pik Botha had to speak after him. So that didn't go well. Mr. Botha then explained to him the history, first of all, the history of his country, the history of all these negotiations. And I know I can remember that Mr. Castro jumped up once or twice and wanted to say something, but obviously he had his chance to say something. And after that, yeah, there was a press conference and the signatures were done, and that was now the trilateral agreement that was signed between Angola, Cuba, and South Africa to withdraw from Angola. Now, as we all know, didn't go so exactly as planned. And on the 1st of April, when this agreement was supposed to come in function, yeah, there was an attack by SWAPO that started. By then, there was a lot of units that's already been withdrawn from Namibia. And it was only 1 or 2 battalions, 101, 102, and Khufu that stayed behind. And they had to now defend what was not actually supposed to be the part of the agreement. Because at that stage, the units were confined to bases. Obviously, when this happened, we flew to, the general and his team flew to Namibia. And we had meetings in Mount Echu, just outside of Otjiwarongo. And obviously there it was the Angolans, South Africa, the Cubans, and the Russians and the Americans were observers there. And obviously they informed the UN Security Council that this is now the situation, this is what's happening now. So that was the period of that 9-day war, Operation Merlin, where this happened. So it was again agreed that there will be a ceasefire and SWAPO will withdraw back to Angola and our battalions will go back to bases. And but I think there was I don't know whether it's maybe it was too late already in the sense that are we really going to go back to war again? The agreement was already signed. Is it viable to go back to war again? Lots of the units were withdrawn. And so the idea around the Mount Echu agreement was that all parties then agreed to continue with what was initially set out. And then they signed that Mount Echu trilateral agreement again to say that they will force ahead to make Namibia independent, which then obviously happened. There was elections in November of 1989, and which SWAPO then won, and the second biggest party was DTA of Dirk Match. And then in March, 21st of March 1990, it was the independence of Namibia, as it is today. So, yeah, my mind, I was fortunate to be a fly on the wall during that period. I'm happy that I was privileged to be there and to see how this unfolded towards the independence that we had today. I know that there's a lot of people that don't agree how it happened. Obviously, not everybody agrees how it happened, but in the end of the day, Namibia is a peaceful country at the moment. It's a fairly stable country, and there was prevention of more loss of livelihood and lives itself. So in that way, it, in my opinion, was a good thing that the war did end. So for me, General Malan was also somebody that I looked up to. He had a good relationship with his other generals, Chief of Defense Force, Chief of the Army, Chief of the Navy, those people. And some of the meetings that I was privileged to be in, you could see that there was mutual respect amongst them, and it was a good team. They know what they were doing. They were on top of it. One of the things that we also did is we took the parliamentary defense committees. We used to take them to the border once or twice, or once a year maybe. And that's now from all the political parties, so that they could then become get first-hand knowledge of what's actually going on the border, what's going on with the war, so that if there has to be made, if a decision has to be made, then everybody's informed, and if there's something that has to go through Parliament, that they are all informed, and that the decision can be made easier. So it was also very interesting to take all these different politicians on these different tours, so to inform them what's going on. Part of my other responsibilities was to obviously sit in the private secretary booth in Parliament to listen and what's going on, to also ask permission if your minister cannot be in Parliament to ask permission from the chief whip. And because if the minister, for instance, isn't in Parliament and you haven't asked permission that he's got another appointment, for instance, and there's a vote to be done, and he hasn't been informed, or you haven't asked for permission, you will definitely step up on the red carpet. Mr. Malan was also, for me, a private person, a very hard-working man. And obviously, you have to rest as well. So one day he told me that when we were in Windhoek for a meeting, he said, "But is it possible that we can take a few days off and maybe go to the coast?" So I knew, my father knew an owner of a hotel here, and I informed the guy that if it's possible that we can maybe rent his apartment. He had a flat in the hotel, and if we can stay there, obviously unannounced, and for a few days. So he gave permission. So we didn't take a bodyguard with us. So I was now his bodyguard as well. So it's myself, him, and his two sons. So we spent a few days in Swakopmund. Now, during the day, Minister Malan would wear a big sort of hat to cover his baldness, but also maybe to cover himself. So we went for a swim one day. Now, I'm obviously armed, and we're sitting on the beach there, but now the boys are in the water, and I also think, but maybe it's a good time for me to also have a swim. But now what happens now with the minister? And who's going to look after him? So I actually handed my pistol to him and said, will you keep the pistol for a little bit, and I'll go and swim a bit. So yeah, that was also a funny experience that I have with him, and he had no problem doing that. In the evenings at this specific hotel, we would sit in a corner at a table, and one night there was a bus group from Americans, big, like 45 people came into the restaurant and had supper there. And we were now quietly sitting in the corner of the room, and the minister still got his hat on, maybe as a disguise. So this one guy came up to him and said, but aren't you Minister Magnus Malan? Yeah, and he said, yes, I am. So this was a group of America that was actually a lobby group for South Africa at that stage. So obviously we had a good chat, and everybody wanted to take photos because they were pro South Africa at that stage, which was also good to see, because General Malan spent time in America when he did the American staff course, senior staff course, and obviously there he met lots of political groups, and obviously this was now one of the groups that he had met previously, which was quite interesting. Yeah, then I also think that Minister Malan and his team were quite forward-looking, and the way why I say that is that maybe it was before his time, because principles that he applied in the military and decisions that he made, for instance, to integrate the defense force amongst all nations. So that was already for us as military a non-issue, because we had the opportunity and we worked it out, and we sort of handled everybody over the same sphere, because if you go to war with somebody, you have to trust somebody, and doesn't matter what his color or what his race is. And that was quite evident in the military as well. Yeah, so I look back in history, and I look back at my own career, and that will be that time there would be one of my most enjoyable eventually, but also a place where I learned a lot from excellent officers that surrounded us, and that we had the privilege to meet. So that for me was an eye-opener, obviously as a young man, and it gave you some perspective even today, where one can have a look at the history and look back at how it happened and why it happened. Yeah, so after that 2.5 years, I left there and rejoined the military. Yeah, basically that's maybe what I consider relevant to this talk about my time there. Obviously, there's a lot of serious events that happened, a lot of jokes that happened, a lot of not so serious situations, but yeah, it all concluded into a very good time that I had there.
Martins, this is absolutely fascinating. This is of real historical interest, and I have a lot of questions. But I think before we go to that, before we forget, let's talk about Gideon's swim on Sunday, which is past now. What happened there? Because in the last episode, you said he's going to try and swim for hours in the actual ocean.
Yes, we did go out on Sunday morning on the 24th of October. Gideon was very, very nervous because previously most of our training is done in the swimming pool. We have swum a few hours already in the sea, but that's more at the people that would know Swakopmund. That's more in the harbor area where it's calmer. But now we were going to go out quite a few kilometers with a boat, and we're going to drop him off. He was very scared in a sense, but yeah, we went out there. We had a combined prayer to ask the Lord to give us some strength, and we dropped him off. I'm not sure how far we went out, but it was far enough that you could see, you could hardly see the jetty or hardly see the strand. So it was a good distance. And we had two lifesavers with us, one that operated the boat and the other one that accompanied Gideon with a swim. And Gideon swam for 4 hours. Unfortunately, about 20 minutes into the swim, his goggles, I don't know, something went wrong with his goggles, so he couldn't use his goggles. So he had quite a difficult swim, 4 hours in the sea with his eyes was burned. It was obviously burning. But if he completed the 4 hours and he swam, according to the GPS, 7.1 kilometers. I personally think it's closer to 6 kilometers, because if you look at our GPS, there's a stretch that wasn't monitored there, so that's another 700 or 800 meters that was lost there. So, but in any case, when we finished after 4 hours, we came out, and we were very, very happy with his effort. The water was quite cold, about 15 or 16 degrees, maybe even less. He didn't pick up any. He was quite good. There was no hypothermia, so that was a good test for us. And yes, we're a week or two away. We're just waiting for a call now from Cape Town to see when there's a window of opportunity weather-wise, then we will go. Also, that video that you put up, obviously a few people watched it. There were some comments, but we did get one or two people that actually contributed to us, and I want to say very thank you for them. I personally, obviously, also thank them already. So yes, yeah, we're nearly there. Anybody that wants to support us maybe a little bit more is good. This morning, I also got some good news that we might have another 2 aeroplane tickets sponsored, but that's now from another source. But still, I want to thank everybody that listened to this. And this is a situation where there's a bigger cause behind this. And I'm quite nervous about the flight or the swim, but I think we are ready now. So any day now, it's going to happen.
Yeah, no, we say thank you to those people who contributed. Appeal to the rest of you. Those of you who don't know what this is about, Gideon will be swimming from Robben Island to Oberstrand.
Yeah.
As you explained in our videos, I'll put a link in here. He is an Olympian swimmer, but he's from a disabled team. If I may use that word, I'm not sure if it's correct these days. If not, I apologize. But what he's trying to do is to show that people like him has a full life. They don't need to be hidden in a bed, back in the rooms like in the old days. So please support this. Now, I have a few questions for you. In the first place, your honeymoon was now horribly interrupted. You're still married to her? Did you understand?
Yes, I'm still married to her. I mean, I think I'm married now for 33 years. Yeah, it's too late now to leave me. No, I'm still married. It's been a wonderful experience, and she's been a great supportive wife and mother to the children. Yeah, and I must say that that 2.5 years, most that I saw of her was when I waved from the airport when we left somewhere or was going somewhere. But yeah, I'm still with her and everything is going well. Thank you, Koos.
I've heard that the food which is normally served at these state functions are quite dreadful. Can you tell me if that rumor is true or not?
Yeah, of course, I would say, no, I would actually have to disagree because maybe for me, I mean, I'm somebody that eats anything, so there's nothing that I do not eat. So for me, it was also always another free meal that went down well. So no, they do obviously hang out and present the best. So no, it was good.
Which brings me to a rather sad story. A few years ago in South Africa, some people wrote a book where they claimed basically that Magnus Malan was a pedophile. I'm not going to even mention that book's name. I think it's the biggest bullshit I've ever seen in my life. Forgive my language. But you were close to the man for 2.5 years. Were there any such neigings, such things in his life which you could detect to see that he would be interested in small boys?
It's absolutely despicable, the people that wrote that book. It is total, utter nonsense. The amount of harm that they gave that family will haunt them in the future. Magnus Malan was a Christian. He was a family man. And I can testify to that because whenever it was possible for me to go and visit my wife, he would make everything possible for me to do that. I had many personal discussions with him about many other things, not military, not work-wise. I personally know that that is total bull. And the other thing is that specific time when they did visit Bird Island, two people that I know very well did service there. And they can testify that that's not true. The other thing is there's a flight plan that you have to fill and submit. So why would any pilot load up small children to fly to Bird Island?
Were you ever contacted by these authors to ask your opinion before they wrote the book? Because you're the one who arranged the aircraft. You're the one who was in charge of all the military flights.
No, I was never contacted. So I think even there, what they wrote about was they didn't do their research good enough. And that is, there was also an interview with General Opperman, which he also obviously refuted all these allegations. But that's now done. I mean, it's something that somebody did and wrote about a man of the stature of Magnus Malan, which will hang there in the cloud for everybody to see. And I'm very, very upset about this. And that they could do something like that to a man of his stature and of his principles.
He was actually a very good officer. I know this George M. James fellow wrote a book. I think it's codenamed Love 72, in which he talks about this very incident and also says it's the biggest nonsense ever. And they explained that the book had to be withdrawn, that the lawyers had to get involved, but the damage is done. You know, we do this in court as well. You know, we would ask something like very innocent, like to the witness who's there for assault, to say to him, do you still assault your wife? Of course, it's not allowed in court, but if you've planted that seed, and then that's probably the worst kind of journalism I've ever heard of in my life. But let me move on. It's distasteful, that part, but I had to ask you, and I thank you for your question, for your answer. Buttons, were you ever worried about the future of 32 Battalion? While you were seeing that, okay, Namibia is going to get independent, what's going to happen to these guys? Did it ever bother you?
Of course, let me say that initially, maybe not, but one of the things that stand out for me and that I was privy to be able to do was that we got a task to get all our soldiers South African citizenship. And that was quite a big exercise. And then eventually when they withdrew from Namibia and went to Pomfret, eventually later on one could see that politics is going to interfere into this situation. And that's also one of the sad stories of the military history of 32 Battalion, where they were basically just dumped and left on their own accord. And the Military Veterans Association has done a hell of a lot to help these people. But yes, I didn't foresee it, and I think not many people did, but eventually it became prevalent that this is going to happen, and it is one of those sad days in the history of our unit.
There are a lot of people watching you who has, I would say, very conservative views about life. And I read all the comments. And of course, we have to be careful, and I have to appeal to all of you here to keep the politics out of your comments, because I'm not the only one reading it. Those guys who work with moustaches and beards and, the cloak and the daggers, the spies, the intelligence guys, they also look at the comments here. So don't expose yourself to nonsense. If you think you are safe behind your little name, which you write there, don't be stupid. Really, we can trace you. But now I need to ask you, Buttons, when you were observing all these negotiations to get Namibia independent, did you ever feel that there was a betrayal ongoing, or were these people genuine in their belief that this war has to end? We need to find a peaceful solution for the people of Namibia, of which you are one.
Yes, I obviously think that different people have different opinions about that. And that the solution that was eventually put on the table was maybe not the one that everybody wanted to see. But I will also say that time maybe let you filter through lots of information that you previously had. And people also change their opinions over the years. But in my opinion, it was the best decision that could have been done. Otherwise, we would have been, I don't know where, how many people would have lost their lives. More people would have lost their lives. And that's now from both sides, all sides. And in the end of the day, it's a situation of, do you really want to continue with war? I mean, we've seen now after that in the rest of the world what war does to countries and to people, and how it has developed in Africa. I mean, you can just go read The State of Africa, a book that comes out every few years, to see what's still functional in Africa and who's at war and who's not at war and what countries are stable. It's only a few. You can maybe count it on one hand in Africa that's stable. So there's no winners in war. Now maybe politicians eventually decide on what the outcomes would be. and could it have been different? Did we make certain decisions that didn't work out properly? Did we give away certain ideas? Did we give away certain principles? Yes, that might be true as well. But I'm still of the opinion that I can now sit in a country which is stable, and where I can live a reasonable good life without looking over my shoulder every day.
And you have electricity.
Exactly, and we also get it from you guys in South Africa.
Yeah, we can't figure that one out. And for the international listeners, South Africa does not have electricity anymore. It's crashing. For hours every day, it's off. There's an old joke. It's not a joke, but they say that, what did we have before candles? Yeah, that's a joke. What did we have before candles? Electricity. And that is what mismanagement will do to you. Now, I remember the 9-day war. I had friends in Kufut who were fighting there. I have some of them who died. Well, all of them described to me afterwards how the army came, especially 6-1 Meg, and assisted them. So I want to say thank you to all of you who assisted the policemen in those days. It was one hell of a fight. Buttons, I understand that you organized a flight for the 3-2 Battalion old men. I don't know how to say it, alumni, the ones who used to serve there. You organized the Air Force flight for the old guys to go and say goodbye to the unit where it was stationed originally. Can you tell me about that?
Yes, that was in 1989, late in 1989. I was then still the president of the previous 3-2 Battalion Association. And after that, they started a new one, the 3-2 Military Veterans Association. But yes, I had maybe some privileges because I could go and talk to General Malan and explain to him what we're doing. And he was obviously aware of our association. And then I asked him, and I said, I've got this plan that I want to take a lot of people up to Buffalo before the unit totally withdraw. And that's now serving and non-serving and ex-members. So I got the go-ahead from him, and I then went to Jan Geldnys, General Geldnys, and asked him. And that was okay. So we put the plan together. And eventually, I think it was 106 or 107 men and a few women that flew up to Buffalo, landed at Omega, and we had a few days there, and we had a program. But that was also an interesting story. Lots of things happened. So I was called in by General Geldnys, and he told me that I have to take a journalist or two with, and which I then politely said, but I don't think that's a good idea because we don't want journalists there. So he didn't, he said to me, I'm not asking, I'm telling you, because the one guy that we had to take with was the, let's call it the curator of the military museum. So he had to go and write a story about that. And then there was another one from Paratus or Uniform, and then another journalist from the SABC. So there was in total 5 women. My wife was obviously also there because she was the secretary of the association. There were 2 or 3 sisters, nurses that served there that we also took with. And by then, when we arrived there at Buffalo, it was, the unit had actually already withdrawn. It was only a few skeleton people still available. And a very interesting weekend for some. For others, I think they can't much remember what happened. Obviously, there were a few incidents. Obviously, some of it ended up in the newspapers, and that's there to be read. And I obviously went in front of the general again afterwards to explain and cover up again. So, yeah, very interesting. But I think it was a very good weekend. We said goodbye to our previous home, and it was good to see all the guys that was there and that served there, and I think that started a bond, and it kept that's still going today, and that's why the association is also doing so well.
We are going to have a future episode with Bottens and Williams Skikkering. Do I say his name correct? Skikkering, and of course Kevin Johnson.
Yeah.
Where the three of you will be talking just about Rito Battalion and your time there. So I'm looking forward to that one. Before we go, I have to ask you once again, please consider Gideon. I will leave the links here. It's important. It feels nice to help people, you know, it's a good thing to give if you're capable of giving. So can you tell me, Bottens, what happened afterwards? After you left, I know you resigned your commission. Why did you leave the army, and what happened further?
Yes, after I left the ministry, I was actually promoted to become the second in command of 4SAI, which is a mechanized unit. And I was not very sure about that, but fortunately, our previous 2IC, Commandant Jan Hougaard, crossed my paths again, and he asked me to join his unit, which was 111 Battalion in Amsterdam. And I served there for a year. By then, General Malan was already then, in my eyes, demoted to water affairs and forestry. And President Botha resigned or stepped down as president, and Mr. A.W. de Klerk took over as president of South Africa. Now, obviously, one has to know that it was a time where discussions was going on between the ANC and South African government. And it was a difficult time, I think, for the military, in the sense that who's now the enemy and who's not the enemy. I know that we, in 111 Battalion, we were responsible for the border of Mozambique border, South African border, from Nelspruit to Pongola, which is quite a vast area. And yeah, it's a question of, we caught a lot of people monthly, I mean thousands, that came over from Mozambique to come to South Africa to either work, find jobs, eat, hungry. I mean, some of them we caught so many times that we knew them by their names. So we wrote a document where we asked the higher command who's now the enemy, who's not the enemy. But in the eyes of the military, if you cross a border with a weapon, then you are enemy. If you cross the border as a civilian individual, we catch you, we go through the paperwork again, and we deport you back to your country where you came from. And I think it was a situation of some of the things that I wanted to, or believed in and wanted to achieve in future. I was a little bit maybe put off. I wasn't sure if the military was still part of my DNA. And basically that's the reason why I then decided to resign. And which I then did in January of 1991. And then toured South Africa and Namibia for a year to decide what I want to do. And then ended up in the Boland. So, yeah, was it the right decision? For me, I think it was the right decision. I can, for other people that stayed behind and did the best, yeah, it was good for them. But I think it was a difficult time that lay ahead for very good officers that had now to join the integrated new South African Defence Force.
Well, Buttons, we're coming to the end now, but we're not done with you because you will be back for other videos as well in the future, and we're grateful for that. But I always ask people right at the end, looking back at your life in the military as well as in your civilian life, do you have any advice for anybody who's listening here?
Yes, I do. I mean, I was asked a few months ago if I want to do a TEDx talk and or a TED talk. And I said to the guy, yeah, maybe I can talk about 40 years of business, and every 10 years I started something new, and I've got this wanderlust, and I never know, is this now what I actually want to do? And so I can actually give people advice of how not to do it, rather than how to do it. Although I think there's a lot of lessons that one can learn from how I did it and why it didn't go the way it should have gone. But no, it's not all doom and gloom, but some of the situations is just that it came situations with not the right time, not the right place. And that is the way that your life is and your path is worked out. I would say that one, my suggestion or my lesson that I want to leave here is that if you make a decision, stick with that decision. If it was the wrong decision, then first of all, you have to accept that it was wrong and then move on. Now, every mistake that you made or every loss that you had is also an experience that you had. And from that specific experience, you can learn something. So it's actually also a lesson that you've learned. And if you can take the good out of that lesson and throw the bad away, then you can proceed with your life. Yeah, obviously also to be honest with yourself. And that's vital. If you're not honest with yourself, you might be lingering on and hanging on to situations and ideas that will not work out. So in this very difficult time that I'm going through at the moment, where I had a very lucrative business that was now actually came to a screeching halt because of COVID, and it's not at our own fault. Then a few years ago, then when I started doing team building and did some courses on it, I was asking myself, is this now what I want to do? So maybe it's the way that the Lord works with you and what he puts in your way and how he does it. And I've now realized that I do enjoy what I'm doing now, although it's not currently financially viable. But the pleasure that I get out of speaking to people, teaching people, facilitating people on behavioral change, and also that it's all in the way that you think, your thinking preference. And if you see how specific stories that's relatable to modern life and business, and how people engage with that. And if you see the behavioral change that happens, it's all about feeling, thinking, behaving, then you get a serious satisfaction out of that. And that is why I have decided that I will, I mean, obviously something else might come up, but as long as it's possible for me to have some small role to play in people's lives and to change them for the better, I will do that.
Well, I wonder, you know, we recently started something on legacy again. We have another playlist. Some of you might have seen me introducing it. It's called Legacy Partners. And what we do at Legacy Partners is we invite experts, we invite people amongst our own, and we say, come and talk to us, tell us what you do, share your knowledge, share what can be of benefit to everybody else. And would you be willing to come and explain to us this behavioral changes, patterns, things you do on the team building?
Yes, of course. I mean, that'll be a utmost pleasure for me to talk about that. Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, we're looking forward to that. And now we have to say goodbye because my wife is glaring at me. She wants to start recording herself. So I say to everybody listening here, you're not unimportant. Really, get that idea out of your head. Just because no one cared about you in the old days and people laughed at you when you started talking about your experiences, those days are over. So I invite you, come and talk to me. Come here. Let's get your story out of here. It might even be healing for you. Come and talk to us. You're most welcome. And thank you for listening. Thank you for your thumbs up. Please share as much as you can. That is what keeps the channel alive. And until we meet again, God bless.
Thank you.